If you had asked me prior to taking my zoology class back in college what the world's deadliest animal was, I would have answered hippo. However, it was through this class that I learned this animal is responsible for an estimated 700,000 to a million deaths per year and actually led to the creation of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 1946 here in the US. This animal is also recognized on August 20th each year to highlight its impact on public health. I'm Maria Andrea, the Community Engagement Specialist from Williamson County and City's Health District, a county just north of Austin, Texas, who's a passionate public health worker with almost a decade of public health experience dedicated to making public health more accessible to you, the public, on Public Health Is. If you've ever been curious about the ins and outs of public health, join me for a special series I'm calling In the News to learn more about emerging public health issues, how they could and would impact the Lone Star State, and what that means for you as a resident of Williamson County. So today I've got a returning guest, our very own resident bug expert.
Welcome back to me, I guess. Yeah, it's good to be back and talk about my baby.
And your name is?
My name's Jason. I am the public health entomologist here. So I oversee our mosquito surveillance and control operations, as well as keeping an eye out on any human cases of those vector-borne diseases where they spread by bugs.
Right. So world's deadliest animal is a bug.
It is. It is our friend the mosquito. And I think in the next few minutes, we're going to probably hear more than you ever wanted to know about mosquitoes, but that's what makes up a good chunk of my job. So I think it's important. August 20th is recognized as a World Mosquito Day, and it got that from roughly 130 years ago. A British doctor, Sir Ronald Ross, had discovered that mosquitoes are able to transmit malaria. And it's important because here we are 130 years later, and malaria is still killing 500,000 people a year. Thankfully, not all here in the United States or Texas. But interestingly enough, malaria is still a consistent problem for us, public health. Even in 2025, we had 12 cases of locally acquired malaria, which is where these individuals that got sick didn't report any travel outside of the United States. And we had 5 different states report that. Texas is one of those. So that was pretty interesting. We haven't seen that in 30 years here in the United States.
And I think you touched on it a little bit, but when it comes to mosquitoes, what makes them so deadly is the fact that they pass on a lot of viruses.
Exactly. They don't get the title world's deadliest animal, that reigning title, without, a list of pathogens. I mean, we just talked about malaria being one that's probably the driving factor of a lot of those deaths in Africa and Asia. But some of the other ones that you hear when we think about mosquito-borne disease or yellow fever, that's still a thing. There is actually a little bit of an outbreak going on in South America right now. Dengue is an emerging threat as well. And then here stateside, we have West Nile virus, which is the one we hear about a lot here. And things like Eastern equine encephalitis, and about another dozen or two pathogens that are relevant.
Right. I remember aging myself a little bit. Zika was in the news a lot. Is that still a threat to the US, or is that something we don't worry about as much here anymore?
I wouldn't say a threat today. However, Zika is still endemic in other parts of the world. And all it takes is kind of I like to say the Goldilocks conditions, right place, right time, right conditions for someone to travel to the United States and get sick or develop, I should say, from Zika, and then have the potential to transmit Zika to our local mosquitoes. We have them here. They don't just fly around with Zika, but if they bite someone and take a blood meal, that could potentially cause that local transmission, like we talked about.
Okay. So that's good to know. And you did mention West Nile because that is what's in the news right now. I think sticking with that, but also not every mosquito causes disease, right?
Exactly. So this is where it blows a lot of people's minds, but I often kind of make the parallel to my veterinary background, working as a veterinary assistant for 15 years. But we think about dogs. Dogs have different breeds. You've got some people are golden retriever people like myself. Some people are like, oh, I love Doug the pug, or I'm a Frenchie kind of person. Mosquitoes worldwide, we've got like 3,000 different types of mosquito. And then zooming into Texas, we've got 88. Here in Williamson County, about 35. So incredible diversity. And, like you said, they don't all bite. We have some that are very specific in what they want. There's a mosquito here in Williamson County that all she does feed on earthworms.
So not even people.
Not even people blood. Nope. That's something that I always think is really fascinating about these bugs and, just their biology, their ecology, how they thrive and how they are part of these ecosystems. But there are a few, like the ones that can transmit West Nile virus, the dengue, those kind of things. That's really what drives a lot of our mosquito control operations. We're not trying to eradicate them because that's impossible. There's no way of doing that. They've lived 400 million years for a reason. They're pretty hardy. The goal is reducing those populations to help minimize that public health risk.
Absolutely. And so when we think about, I mean, I know just because there seems to be that concern that there's positive pools, which we will talk on kind of the surveillance aspect of what we do here at the health district to keep an eye on populations and what's going on locally. What do people need to know specifically about West Nile as an illness?
Yeah, so West Nile has what's kind of called that iceberg effect. So most of the time, people like you and I mean, we aged ourselves a little bit earlier with our decade in public health. Overall, young, healthy people are pretty low risk for severe infection. However, that doesn't mean that it's absent. It can still happen. It's just from what we see big picture in public health, it's about 80% of people don't develop any symptoms at all. That's the best way it can be for a virus, right? You get infected, you don't have any adverse effects, right? However, about 1 in 5 folks can develop just a febrile illness. A lot of times you'll hear people say a flu-like illness. But interestingly enough, West Nile doesn't cause respiratory symptoms like the flu. So we always just say a general flu-like illness. You fever, chills, headache, you just feel run down for a couple of days. You probably won't even go to the doctor. It doesn't often take you down completely, but it humbles you. And then there is a small percentage of folks that can get what's called neuroinvasive disease. Still the same virus, but it's just where it gets. If it gets into that brain and spinal cord, you can get meningitis and encephalitis, which essentially inflammation of your brain and spinal cord. That's very important for any body function that you do. Your brain tells your body what to do, right? So with those folks, we can see seizures, tremors, what they would say in medicine of an altered mental status. So you're just confused, not really sure what's going on. You may be talking to, your grandpa, grandma, whatever. All of a sudden they're normally with it. They're like, what day is it today? Or they think they're 10 years in the past. So those things can be pretty concerning. West Nile doesn't have a treatment. It's supportive care. You got to ride it out. But thankfully with the febrile phase, most of the time folks are just fine. They recover. They do okay without any kind of treatment. The neuroinvasive form that unfortunately we see because they're in the hospital, they're getting the testing. And that's when we find out in public health. So I would say it's a little overrepresented compared to West Nile infections overall. But those folks tend to have lasting effects from that illness, whether it's having to learn how to walk again or learn how to talk again. They may lose vision, all kinds of different severe, what we would say, morbidity effects from it that can affect their quality of life going forward.
Right. So biggest thing to think about is how do we protect ourselves from mosquitoes? I will say personally, I mean, one, it's just too hot, right? I don't leave the house.
Right.
I'm indoors almost all the time, but I am meticulous just being out in the hill country, mainly floods, going and pouring any standing water. I don't want to give those little buggers an opportunity to populate.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the summertime, it's tough for us here in Texas with our locally 35 different types of mosquito. They all behave a little differently. They like different things. Those floodwater mosquitoes get rained a lot this year. And that's part of what's driving what we're seeing with this West Nile season this year. But those floodwater mosquitoes, those ones that you have 5 or 6 land on you when you walk outside to get to the car and you're brushing them off, those typically don't transmit disease. However, it's still 5 or 6 itchy bites that are unpleasant that we don't want to deal with. Or if you have a kid, they sit there and scratch it until now they've got a wound, essentially. So there's still some, headaches with it, but thankfully it's not something West Nile. But that West Nile mosquito, she likes nasty water that has sat. So after a flood, that water is not immediately West Nile breeding ground, per se. It takes a little bit of time. Those floodwater mosquitoes are going to do their thing. They're going to come out, bite people. It's after that water has sat, become more organic. That's when those particular species of the mosquito will go down, lay their eggs, those kind of things, then feed on a bird. That's where the virus is maintained in nature. But mosquito will take a blood meal on an infected bird. Go lay her eggs. She may take another blood meal, unfortunately, on a person sitting on a patio at night or early in the morning. That's when she's most active.
Got it.
So that's kind of the other, little tidbit throughout all of this. Bloodwater mosquitoes, if it's 6 a.m., 6 p.m.,
It doesn't matter.
they
Yeah.
could care less. Absolutely. They're gonna find you and they're gonna bite you. But the West Nile mosquito, she's a lot more sneaky. She's gonna catch you, late at night when it's a little bit more reasonable outside. They'll walk the dog or sit on the patio, whatever you're doing, right? That's when you're at highest risk. Getting rid of the standing water is the big thing for mosquitoes overall. If you can, when it's not insultingly hot outside, wearing loose, long sleeves, long pants. That West Nile mosquito, she's smaller, she's less likely to bite through clothing, but
Mhm.
she will look for an area of skin.
Mhm.
That scent on your skin is what they're attracted to as well.
Mhm.
Also, avoiding peak mosquito activity. So for this particular mosquito, avoiding time outside at dusk and dawn, unfortunately,
Mhm.
kind of messes up our summer routines, but it's a short pass for preventing.
Right. And then wearing bug spray. I know it's a bit contentious for some people, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and really I don't want to say a hill I will die on, but a lot of times people ask about insect repellent. As a health official, our recommendations are going to lie around things that are EPA approved. Those are
Mhm.
things that have been studied. Here is how you should use it, when you should use it, those kind of things versus, product A, or whatever that is. There's
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff out there nowadays that people have come up with. But if it hasn't been tested, that's not something that I would feel comfortable making a recommendation around. Ultimately, mosquitoes not biting you.
Exactly.
You
If it
gotta
works
give
for
yeah.
you, keep doing it.
Yeah, if you wanna rub garlic all over you, that's fine. A vampire won't bite you either. Mosquitoes, the vampire of the bug world. Garlic doesn't deter all.
Mhm. Another thing I've seen people do, which we've talked about, is the mosquito pools of doom, which more often than not, I feel like is causing more problems. But
Yeah, and I guess this is a good spot for me to quickly give my, 90-second elevator on my favorite myths. And
Mhm.
since you brought that one up, we'll start with that one. That one is so hot on social media right now. I mean, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, pretty much everywhere except for LinkedIn, which
Mhm.
is thank gosh, it's not there.
Business professionals don't care for it.
Exactly, exactly. The idea of this bucket is take a 5-gallon bucket, put grass clippings, make it an organic water source that
Mhm.
West Nile mosquito
Exactly, I was
loves.
about to say, so that would be exactly what that
That's what she
mosquito
wants.
wants.
So, you ain't wrong. But then they'll take 1 dunk, 5 dunks, 6 dunks, mosquito dunks, which is a larvicide. So it
Mhm.
is targeted to kill larval mosquitoes. And then what happens is the perception is mosquitoes will come lay their eggs, and then those eggs will hatch into larvae. Larvae eat the larvicide, they die, mosquito populations decrease over time. We know mosquito dunks work. They're PA approved, that they have shown that they work. We know that. But when you put out more sources for these mosquitoes, we talked about the diversity of them. That West Nile mosquito and many other mosquitoes, mostly all of them, will need to take a blood meal to produce eggs. So before they go lay their eggs in that water, if that bucket is on your back patio, you're sitting on the patio thinking you're protected, that mosquito can come bite you, potentially infect you with a
Mhm.
disease, then goes and lays their eggs. Yeah, they won't hatch, but that's that one. We've got plenty of them.
Right, and you need to be changing them out too. It loses its effectiveness after time.
Yes, exactly. And humans by nature, we're lazy. If you forget about that bucket, forget to put your gunks in, or they didn't make the curbside or the Amazon cart that week, now it is an area where mosquitoes can hatch and you can have more.
Mhm.
So that's something that I would like for people to avoid. But some of the other big ones when we talk about mosquito control, because, that is a form of mosquito control or controlling those larval mosquitoes. But oftentimes when we are coordinating adult mosquito control, so that's going to be that truck mounted
Mhm.
treatment where you've got the fogger in the back of the truck driving down that all of our parents ran behind when they were kids, right? So they say. There's this often thought that this kills everything, but it's very targeted. I want people to know that I am a friend of pollinators myself. And ironically, mosquitoes are pollinators too.
Mhm.
They're just not very good. They're below JV. They're like C team
Mhm.
pollinators. But the goal of that, the reason it's done overnight is that's when that Culex mosquito or West Nile mosquito is most active. So we're
Mhm.
targeting that particular one. That's also when your butterflies, your bees, and a lot of your good pollinators are resting and hibernating, and small drops are suspended in the air for that mosquito to fly into. Other bugs aren't coming out, so they shouldn't be getting exposed. But even taking it a step further, we think about toxicology,
Mhm.
or how toxic something is. Yes, if you look at the label, this is a toxic product. It's a pesticide.
Mhm.
We're killing a bug, right?
Mhm.
Or several of them. But when you think about the size of a mosquito weighs, if you put them on a little scale, they weigh
Mhm.
about 5 milligrams. A honeybee weighs about 100 milligrams, 20 times larger than a
Mhm.
mosquito. So thinking about it, that'd be like a full grown adult accidentally taking a children's Tylenol. It's going to be sublethal, right? But if a infant takes 500 milligram Tylenol tablet, it
Mhm.
could destroy their liver and have
Mhm.
severe consequences. So I think that's important to know. But also, it's a piece of that namesake of our program, integrated
Mhm.
vector management. But the adult treatments of mosquitoes is only a small percentage of what we do. It's just something that you see as
Mhm.
it's going down. It is a critical part to public health.
And so I think this is a good place to shift into kind of what you do in the integrated vector management program.
Yeah. High level with mosquitoes is we have traps across the county where every week we collect mosquitoes. We are very targeted for that West Nile mosquito. We do find other ones, but the ones that we test are that one that transmits West Nile. We catch the Zika mosquito, the malaria mosquito. We catch them every week. However, we don't have a lot of people running around with malaria or Zika that these mosquitoes are picking up and transmitting. So, from a cost perspective, there is not a return on investment to test those mosquitoes and look for it when we, for the most part, know that there's not human cases going around. But if we ever are concerned that someone in this neighborhood was diagnosed with dengue and they may have exposed mosquitoes, we can shift our operations and target that mosquito with a different trap, test specifically those mosquitoes that are known to transmit it, and kind of tailor our response to that. But again, once they're tested for its West Nile, St. Louis encephalitis, another cousin to West Nile, and then Eastern equine encephalitis, which honestly here is pretty rare, but surveillance is about looking for things. If it shows up, that problem, we're pretty central in Texas. Eastern equine encephalitis is more of an Eastern thing, and it's the namesake. But whenever we find that, we will act upon it. And that may be, sometimes just public education or bringing out the truck, doing a 1 to 2 night free adult mosquito control mission.
And is there, when you go out to spray, like a threshold for when and why you should do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So mosquito control agencies across the country are going away from that routine treatment where it's like, oh, it's Thursday, time to send a truck out. That's not realistic. It's also not integrated mosquito management. That's like me saying, let me just take an antibiotic every week just to make sure I don't and then here come the super bugs.
Exactly. Yeah. As someone who literally works with antibiotic resistant bacteria, we don't do that.
Exactly. So, we don't want to do that. So our thresholds in general, for the most part, from a county-wide perspective, if a mosquito trap is positive for West Nile, that means we have transmission in that isolated area, whether it's a trap in Taylor or a trap in Liberty Hill, there's some transmission going on. So if that first trap is positive, adult mosquito control is appropriate. The big goal here is to prevent human illness. We don't see a lot of human illnesses that, there's multiple factors as to why, but one of those is mosquito control intervening before humans get infected. It's just hard to measure the effectiveness of that because you can't just say, oh, human cases need mosquito control worked because, people have to go to the doctor. They still have to get tested.
Exactly.
The whole human barriers and different variables that take that into consideration. But that public education piece is like right now, all of our hospital partners and things like that, we've made aware that, hey, it's a pretty active West Nile virus season. If someone is presenting to your urgent care, your ER, or even just your clinic with, a febrile illness that they don't look like it's flu, it's not something else that's obvious, consider testing for West Nile. Even though there's not a treatment, but they may say, hey, this is most likely a viral infection. Go home, hydrate, sleep it off. But the more we know about that, the better we can kind of understand the dynamics of how this virus is behaving.
And I think you've given a big picture of why we do this, right? Integrated vector management is wanting to do what's best ecologically, because I don't think a lot of people think about that, right? Not just that mosquitoes are pollinators, but they're also part of the ecosystem. One of my favorite pollinators is bats. And bats, they feed a lot on mosquitoes, but so do dragonflies that then the birds eat and other things eat. So it's important that we are mindful from the dosage perspective of what is going to do the least amount of harm, but be the most helpful. And then also that education piece is what's really most important, personal protection. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. You're on it. And I mean, a lot of times there is concern about, particularly bees and dragonflies. Those are the two bugs that, folks worry about the most. And I do too. And that's something that anytime we have a treatment, if we have any adverse events or what we would call a non-target kill, I have not driven out and seen, a mass casualty of dragonflies or anything like that. We wouldn't expect that. If we're applying these products per the EPA label that has guided a lot of money into testing to make sure that we don't affect those non-targets, we shouldn't see that. A lot of times people have asked me like, oh, can we add more bats to the ecosystem, add more dragonflies? I wouldn't play with bats because bats are
I know.
most common risk of rabies and risk of rabies, risk of West Nile. If you add more bats, they're not necessarily a vector like a mosquito is for rabies, but I wouldn't want to mess with that. Dragonflies, people forget that the life cycle is not the same as a mosquito. It takes a year basically for that dragonfly to go from its immature stage to adult stage. Now, the larvae and the adult both eat mosquitoes, but if we rear dragonflies, one, super duper expensive, and mosquitoes breed at a much faster rate.
Yeah.
So not realistic either. And plus, if I released a cage of dragonflies to go eat mosquitoes, but they're not trained like dogs. They're going to go eat what they want.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Same thing with bats. Bats, mosquitoes aren't their primary diet. They would prefer a moth that's much more protein filled, but they do their part. Again, like I said, we're targeting a specific type of mosquito, not all of them. You'll still see mosquitoes the next day because there are some mosquitoes that weren't exposed, but those mosquitoes you're seeing at the day are typically not those ones biting you at night.
Awesome. So World Mosquito Day will be on August 20th. Any closing thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I think that the big thing is World Mosquito Day is about awareness of mosquitoes for the bug that they are, but also the impact they have to public health. That's super important. And the other part is the opportunity, showing how us as mosquito control professionals, public health, mosquito control districts, but even on the other side, our physicians, our veterinarians, how we can all play a part in combating mosquito-borne diseases because they affect us all. On the veterinary side, horses can get several mosquito-borne diseases. Also, dogs, heartworm disease transmitted by mosquitoes. So, yeah, leveraging that One Health approach that I always talk about, preventing standing water, things like that, it protects your pets too. And sometimes that's a bigger priority to people than protecting themselves. So, I think it's also something that, West Nile is what we would say evergreen. It's endemic here in Texas. And every year we talk about it. People are like, oh, it's West Nile. But it's something that when we find these hot spots, that means your risk of getting West Nile is there every year. Had it before. That's something that we are always monitoring for and altering our plans to kind of do the best we can in preventing human infection. But I think we're doing a pretty good job.
I think so too. I want to highlight West Nile virus is the most common mosquito-borne disease here in the U.S. That's why we care about it. That's why we're screening for it. And again, reporting would probably depend on severity of disease. But from what does get reported, we get about 1,300 cases of severe illness being reported per year in the U.S. And unfortunately, 130 people do die every year from this.
I think it's important to note that of that, 1,300 that we see, about 10% pretty consistently come from Texas and about 4 other states. It's definitely a public health problem, but what we can do is through surveillance, through control, kind of have the public best prepared to prevent it. That's the big part of public health, prevention and promotion, right?
Exactly. And like you said, we know this happens every year. It's mosquito season, realistically, March through November. So we're constantly monitoring. Jason does a great job of alerting the community, working with our marketing team to get the message out there so that people are aware, does a ton of outreach and education. If you're ever there, sometimes he actually brings his little lab setup as well. So you can see the mosquitoes. And of course, please, 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 for the love of all that is good, just dump standing water after rain. Do a little walk around.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of these resources on our website. There's a little table that I tell folks out in the field, make it like a scavenger hunt. Send your kids out there, let them go find things. If it's a toy or something like that, don't let it just sit there and hold water. But also, people are always welcome to email mosquito@wilcotx.gov with any mosquito-related question, whether it's about control or something you saw on Instagram. Like, is this legit? I get no kickback from promoting or not promoting anything. Even when we talk about mosquito dunks, I don't necessarily promote the dunk itself, but BTI, which is what is in a mosquito dunk, that's something that's commercially available that I'm like, hey, it does work, but make sure you're using it within the accordance of the label.
Okay. And so that email is mosquito@wilcotx.gov.
Correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jason. And thank you to our partners. Again, we have that information on our website. Feel free to look at it at WCCHD.org. And a big thank you to you if you've made it to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please follow this podcast, comment, and share with family and friends. Want to learn more about emerging public health issues and all the great work Williamson County and City's Health District does to manage them? Tune in on the 2nd, 4th, and sometimes 5th Tuesday of every month for new episodes where we'll discuss WCCHD's roles in keeping our communities healthy and safe. Again, be sure to check out our website at WCCHD.org. and follow us on all our social media pages for more information and podcast updates. Are you interested in learning more about a specific public health topic for a future episode? Feel free to reach out to us at publichealthistx@wilcotx.gov. And remember, public health is you, it's me, it's we, it's us, it's mosquito prevention.